The boy was 7 years old, blind, and standing in the rain outside the most expensive building in Manhattan when he grabbed the sleeve of the most powerful man in New York and said the 4 words that changed both their lives forever. "Please, sir, help me." Kang Hyun Woo stopped walking. His security detail stopped with him. 3 men in black suits, earpieces, the specific stillness of professionals trained to neutralize threats before they materialized. They had assessed the boy in under 2 seconds. Small, thin, wearing clothes 2 sizes too large, soaked through, a white cane in one hand and the other wrapped around the sleeve of a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The boy's eyes were open but unfocused, clouded over with the specific gray of severe cataracts. He could not see the man he had grabbed. He could not see the building behind him, the Kang Corporation headquarters, 47 floors of steel and glass that dominated the Midtown skyline and represented an empire built across 3 generations and 4 continents. He could not see any of it. But he had stopped in exactly the right spot, at exactly the right moment, and grabbed exactly the right sleeve. "Please," the boy said again. His voice was small but steady in a way that had nothing to do with age. The voice of a child who had been through enough to know that steadiness was a survival skill. "My mother is sick. The hospital says they will send her home if we don't pay. She can't go home. She'll die." Hyun Woo looked at the boy for a long moment. His security lead stepped forward. "Sir, we should keep moving." "What's your name?" Hyun Woo said. The boy turned his face toward the sound of the voice. His clouded eyes couldn't find the source exactly, but he oriented toward it with the practiced accuracy of someone who had learned to navigate the world through sound. "Leo," the boy said. "Leo Mensa." Hyun Woo crouched down. His security team exchanged a look. Kang Hyun Woo did not crouch down in the rain for anyone. Kang Hyun Woo, 38 years old, CEO of Kang Corporation, one of the 15 wealthiest men in the United States according to the last 3 Forbes rankings, did not stop for street encounters or slow his schedule for unplanned conversations or kneel on wet Manhattan pavement in a $40,000 suit. But he was crouching now, looking at this boy's face, at the clouded eyes that couldn't quite find him, at the jaw that was set with a determination that looked, in some specific and unsettling way, familiar. "How old are you, Leo?" "7. Where is your mother?" "Columbia Presbyterian, room 412. They said if we don't pay $2,000 by tomorrow, they have to discharge her." His grip on Hyun Woo's sleeve tightened. "She can't come home. She needs the machines. Please, sir, I'll do anything." Hyun Woo looked at the boy's hand on his sleeve. Small fingers, mixed complexion, the specific warm brown of someone with 2 different heritages running through them. Something moved in Hyun Woo's chest that he could not immediately name. "How did you get here?" he asked. "I took the subway. I counted the stops. I heard people say this is where the rich people work." The boy's chin lifted slightly. "I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for a loan. I'll pay it back." "You're 7. "I know," Leo said, "but I'm going to be something when I grow up. I promise I'll pay it back." Hyun Woo was quiet for a moment. Then he stood. He reached into his jacket. He pulled out his card and pressed it into the boy's free hand. "Tell them at the hospital to call this number," he said. "The bill will be handled." Leo's grip on his sleeve didn't release immediately. "Why?" the boy asked. "Because you asked properly," Hyun Woo said. Leo finally let go. Hyun Woo stood in the rain for another moment looking at this child, who was already turning carefully, cane finding the pavement, navigating the Manhattan sidewalk with the concentrated focus of someone who had been doing it alone for a long time. Then he walked into his building and spent the rest of the afternoon unable to explain why he could not stop thinking about a 7-year-old boy's jaw. But I need to take you back, because the story of Leo Mensa and Kang Hyun Woo did not begin on a rainy Tuesday outside a Manhattan skyscraper. It began 8 years earlier, on the other side of the world, in circumstances that neither of them knew about yet. Amara Mensah was 24 years old when she arrived in Seoul on a 6-month research fellowship from Columbia University's Graduate School of International Business. She was from Atlanta, Georgia, the daughter of a Ghanaian father and an American mother, and she had spent her entire academic life being the most focused person in every room she entered. She was not in Seoul for romance. She was in Seoul to work. But Seoul had other plans. She met Kang Hyun Woo at a conference dinner during her 3rd week. He was 30 years old, already the youngest executive vice president in Kang Corporation's history, being groomed for the CEO position he would formally occupy 2 years later. He was sitting across a dinner table from her, and he asked her a question about her research that nobody else at that table had thought to ask, and she answered it fully, and he asked a follow-up question, and 2 hours later they were still talking while everyone else had moved to different conversations. She had not intended to fall in love with him. He had not intended to fall in love with her. Both of them did it anyway, with the specific thoroughness of people who do everything fully when they finally decide to do it. They had 4 months. 4 months of the kind of relationship that exists in a compressed, intensified way when both people know it has an end date. Long walks through Seoul's neighborhoods. Late evenings in his apartment cooking food neither of them was good at cooking. Conversations that started about work and ended somewhere much more honest. She did not meet his family. He had not introduced her because the introduction would have required a conversation about the future that they both knew they were not ready for. His family had expectations. A specific kind of future planned. She was leaving in 2 months. They didn't talk about what came after. Then her fellowship ended. She flew back to New York. They had a long-distance call that lasted 4 hours and ended in the specific sad silence of 2 people who don't have an answer to the question they're both asking. 3 weeks after she landed in New York, Amara discovered she was pregnant. She called Hyun Woo once. He did not answer. She called again. His assistant answered and said he was unavailable. She left a message. The message was never returned. What Amara did not know was that the assistant had screened the call at the instruction of Hyun Woo's mother, who had discovered the relationship during a family meeting and had made certain decisions about what information reached her son during the difficult months that followed. What Amara did not know was that Hyun Woo spent 6 months believing she had simply stopped calling. What Amara did not know was that the silence on both sides had been engineered by someone who had decided this particular complication was inconvenient. What Amara did know was that she was 24, pregnant, and alone. She made a decision. She moved back to Atlanta. She finished her degree remotely. She had the baby in December, a boy with her dark skin and his sharp Korean features, and a jaw that she recognized immediately as not being entirely hers. She named him Leo. She kept the Jade Pendant Hyun Woo had given her during their last week in Seoul, a small carved piece, green and smooth, that had belonged to his grandmother. He had pressed it into her hands the night before she left and said it was for luck and she had never taken it off. She put it in a small box when Leo was born. She would give it to him when he was old enough. She did not try to contact Hyun Woo again. She raised Leo alone. She worked 2 jobs for 3 years, then 1 job and night school, then a promotion that changed things enough to breathe. By the time Leo was 5, she had moved to New York, a small apartment in Washington Heights, a stable position at a nonprofit focused on international development. It was not the life she had imagined at 24. But it was a life she had built entirely herself, and there was a specific pride in that which nothing could touch. Then Leo started losing his vision. It was gradual at first, difficulties in low light, squinting at things that should have been clear. By the time he was 6, the diagnosis was confirmed. Bilateral cataracts, advanced, progressive. Without surgery, he would be fully blind within a year. The surgery was expensive. The insurance covered part. The part it didn't cover was more than Amara had. She managed the gap. She always managed. But then the infection came. A complication following the partial procedure, moving fast, requiring hospitalization and medication and monitoring that added up daily in a way that outpaced everything she could do. That was how Leo ended up on a Manhattan sidewalk in the rain, 7 years old with a white cane, counting subway stops. Hyun Woo paid the hospital bill that afternoon. He did not go to the hospital. He sent his financial team with instructions to handle it completely, not just the outstanding balance but 3 months of projected treatment costs. He told himself it was a charitable impulse. He told himself it had nothing to do with the boy's jaw. He did not entirely convince himself. 2 days later, his assistant brought him an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on hospital stationery. "Mr. Kang, my son told me what you did. I don't know how to thank you for something this large. I am going to find a way to pay it back. I don't know when, but I will. His name is Leo. He is the best thing I have ever done. Thank you for seeing him when you could have walked past. Amara Mensah." Hyun Woo read the note twice. Then he looked at the name. Amara Mensah. He sat with that name for a long time. Then he picked up his phone. "I need you to find someone," he said to his head of security. "A woman named Amara Mensah, currently in New York, has a son named Leo. That's all I have." Welcome to Afro-Korean love stories, where the most impossible things turn out to be true and love finds its way through every wall ever built against it. If you are new here, subscribe right now because this story has only just begun and you are not going to believe where it goes. Drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from. I want to hear from the USA, Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, and everywhere else in the world. Now let's continue. The report came back in 48 hours. Hyun Woo read it at his desk on a Thursday morning, with the Manhattan skyline visible through his office windows, and the sounds of his building operating normally around him, and felt the world shift underneath him in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. Amara Mensah, 32 years old, originally from Atlanta, Georgia, graduate of Columbia University, currently working at a nonprofit in Manhattan. One child, Leo Mensah, age 7, father listed as unknown on the birth certificate. His security team had gone one level further, as he had instructed them to always do. They had found the Jade Pendant, a photograph taken during Leo's hospital intake. A small carved jade pendant, green and smooth, photographed as part of his personal effects inventory. Hyun Woo knew that pendant. He had placed it in Amara's hands himself on a September evening in Seoul 8 years ago. He sat very still at his desk for a long time. Then he called his doctor. "I need a paternity test arranged," he said. "Discreetly, I'll explain when I see you." Hyun Woo went to the hospital himself. He had not planned to go himself. He had planned to send someone. But he found himself in the car heading to Columbia Presbyterian on a Friday afternoon, and he did not redirect the driver. He was shown to room 412. He stood in the doorway. Amara was sitting up in the hospital bed. She looked different from the 24-year-old he had known in Seoul. 8 years different. There were things in her face now that hadn't been there before, a quality of tiredness underneath the alertness, the specific wear of someone who had been doing something very hard for a long time without stopping. She was also, he noted with a specific and unwelcome feeling in his chest, still completely herself. Still the face he had not fully forgotten despite telling himself repeatedly that he had. Leo was sitting in the chair beside her bed, cane across his lap, head turned toward the door as Hyun Woo entered. His clouded eyes couldn't see, but his face oriented toward the sound with the precision Hyun Woo had noticed on the sidewalk. Amara saw Hyun Woo in the doorway. Every trace of color left her face. "Hello, Amara," Hyun Woo said. The room was very quiet. "Hyun Woo," she said. Her voice was completely flat. "Mom," Leo's head turned toward her. "You know him." Amara looked at her son, then back at Hyun Woo. "Yes," she said carefully. "We knew each other a long time ago." Hyun Woo came into the room. He sat in the second chair, the one on the other side of the bed from Leo. He looked at the boy directly, at the jaw. at the specific shape of the eyes that had the slightly different quality of eyes that were carrying both of them. "Leo," he said, "your mother and I need to talk privately for a few minutes. Would that be all right?" Leo considered this with the seriousness of someone accustomed to making their own assessments. "Are you going to help her?" "I'm going to try," Hyun Woo said. Leo reached out and found his mother's hand, squeezed it once. Then he let go. "Okay," he said. Hyun Woo looked at Amara. "He's mine," he said quietly, not a question. Amara looked at him for a long moment. "I called you," she said. 8 years ago, I called twice. Your assistant said you were unavailable. I left a message." Something went cold and specific through Hyun Woo's chest. "I never received a message," he said. "I know," Amara said. "I figured that out eventually." She paused. "I stopped trying after that. I wasn't going to chase someone who didn't want to be found." "I didn't know," Hyun Woo said. "I need you to understand that. I didn't know." Amara looked at him. "I believe you," she said quietly. "But believing you doesn't change the last 8 years." Hyun Woo held her gaze. "No," he said. "It doesn't, but it changes what comes next." He paused. "I want a paternity test, not because I doubt it, because I need it legally. And then I want to be involved, in Leo's life, in his care, everything." Amara was quiet. "Leo doesn't know who his father is," she said. "I know. This is going to be a significant thing for him to process." "I know that too. And I am not going to let anyone disrupt the life I have spent 8 years building for him." "I'm not here to disrupt anything," Hyun Woo said. "I'm here because I stood on a sidewalk 2 days ago and a 7-year-old boy grabbed my sleeve and I recognized something in his face that I should have known about 7 years ago. And I am not walking away from that." Amara looked at him for a very long time. "The paternity test," she said finally. "Then we talk." The test took 5 days. They were the longest 5 days of Hyun Woo's professional memory, which was saying something for a man who had navigated hostile takeovers, regulatory investigations, and the specific hell of a 6-month negotiation with a Korean conglomerate that had tried to undercut his Pacific contracts. None of those had felt like this. He visited the hospital twice during those 5 days, not to see Amara specifically, though he saw her both times, primarily to see Leo. He brought things, books in Braille that Leo ran his fingers over with an expression of intense concentration, a model of the Manhattan skyline made of textured materials that Leo could feel with his hands, a recording of city sounds from different neighborhoods that Leo listened to with his head tilted and identified 3 of them correctly. Hyun Woo watched Leo figure things out and felt something in his chest that he did not have a name for yet, but that was growing larger with each visit. On the second visit, Leo asked him, "Why do you keep coming?" "Because I want to," Hyun Woo said. "Most people don't come back," Leo said. "People say things and then they don't come back." "I came back," Hyun Woo said. Leo considered this. "You smell like my pendant," Leo said. Hyun Woo went still. "What pendant?" "The jade one. Mom keeps it in a box. She let me hold it once. It smells old and expensive, like something that matters." Leo tilted his head. "You smell like that." Hyun Woo looked at this boy. At the 7-year-old who navigated Manhattan alone, who counted subway stops, who grabbed the right sleeve in the rain, who could identify Jade by smell. "Leo," he said carefully, "what do you know about your father?" Leo was quiet for a moment. "Mom says he didn't know about me," he said. "She says it's not a sad story. She says some people's stories just start differently than other people's stories." "Does that bother you?" "Sometimes," Leo said honestly. "Mostly I wonder what he looks like if I could see." Hyun Woo sat with that. "The pendant," he said. "I gave that pendant to your mother 8 years ago in Seoul." Leo turned his face toward Hyun Woo's voice. The clouded eyes couldn't find him exactly. But Leo's expression showed that he was assembling something. "Oh," Leo said quietly. They sat in silence for a moment. "Are you going to do a test?" Leo asked. "Yes." And if it says what you think it says, then I am going to be very involved in your life for a very long time, Hyun Woo said. If that's something you want. Leo thought about this with the same seriousness he brought to everything. Can I think about it? He said. Yes, Hyun Woo said. Take all the time you need. The results came on a Wednesday. 99.97% probability of paternity. Hyun Woo sat in his office and read the number 3 times. Then he called his mother. The call with his mother lasted 45 minutes and covered territory that had been waiting to be covered for 8 years. Hyun Woo had suspected for years that the silence from Amara's side had been managed rather than chosen. His mother's reaction to the news, defensive first then quickly calculating, confirmed what he had suspected. His mother had instructed the assistant to screen those calls. His mother had decided, without telling him, that Amara Mensa was a complication that could be managed away. His mother had been wrong. And now there was a 7-year-old boy in a hospital room in Washington Heights who had been growing up without his father for 7 years because of a decision made by someone who had not had the right to make it. Hyun Woo's voice when he spoke to his mother was completely level and completely final. I have a son, he said. His name is Leo. He is 7 years old. He is brilliant and brave, and he navigated Manhattan alone at age 7 to save his mother's life. He is a Kang, and he will be recognized as one. This is not a conversation. This is information. His mother was quiet for a long time. Hyun Woo. I will bring him to meet the family when he is ready, Hyun Woo said. Not before, and the woman who raised him for 7 years alone will be treated with the respect she is owed. This is also not a conversation. He ended the call. He sat in his office for a moment. Then he went to the hospital. He told Amara the results first. She already knew. She had always known. But she read the paper and held it for a moment and then set it down and looked out the window. What happens now? She said. Whatever you want to happen, Hyun Woo said, within the constraint that I am not disappearing from his life. Amara looked at him. He needs the surgery, she said. The cataract surgery, full procedure, both eyes. His doctor says his vision can be substantially restored. I'll arrange the best surgeon in the country, Hyun Woo said immediately. He needs stability, Amara continued. He has had enough disruption. Whatever we do, whatever this looks like, his stability comes first. Agreed. And I need you to understand something. Her voice was even and direct. I raised that boy alone for 7 years. I made every decision. I worked 2 jobs. I moved cities. I learned Braille so I could help him with his schoolwork. I am his mother, and that does not change because you have a paternity test result. I know, Hyun Woo said. Do you? He looked at her. Amara, he said, I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm here because a 7-year-old boy grabbed my sleeve in the rain, and I recognized my own jaw on his face, and I have been trying to breathe normally ever since. He paused. I missed 7 years. I am not going to pretend that's recoverable or that an explanation makes it right. I'm asking for the chance to be present for whatever comes next. Amara looked at him for a long time. Talk to Leo, she said finally. Tell him yourself. He deserves to hear it directly. Hyun Woo sat with Leo alone for the first time in the hospital room late on a Wednesday afternoon, with the New York light coming gray, and soft through the window, and the sounds of the hospital moving around them. He told Leo the truth. All of it, in language a 7-year-old could hold, that he had known Leo's mother in Seoul, that they had cared about each other, that there had been a mistake, not made by either of them but by someone else, that had kept the information from reaching him, that he had not known Leo existed until 4 days ago on a sidewalk in the rain. Leo listened to all of it without interrupting. When Hyun Woo finished, Leo was quiet for a moment. So you didn't know, Leo said. No. And when you found out, you came. As fast as I could. Leo thought about this. Mom said it wasn't a sad story, he said. She said some stories just start differently. He tilted his face toward the window. I think this is what she meant. Our story started differently. Hyun Woo felt something in his chest crack open quietly. Yes, he said, I think so too. Leo turned back toward him. Can I call you Dad? He asked, simply, directly, the way he did everything. Hyun Woo could not speak for a moment. Yes, he said when he found his voice. Yes, Leo, you can. Leo nodded with the specific satisfaction of someone who has asked a necessary question and received the right answer. Okay, he said. Then I want the surgery because I want to see what you look like. The surgery was scheduled for 3 weeks later at NYU Langone, with the top pediatric ophthalmological surgeon in the country. In the 3 weeks between, several things happened simultaneously that Hyun Woo would later describe as the period in which his life reorganized itself completely. The first was the arrival of his mother in New York. Margaret Kang came with the specific energy of a woman who had spent 40 years managing situations and intended to manage this one. She arrived at the hospital with appropriate gifts for Leo and a carefully prepared expression of warmth, and was met by a 7-year-old boy who could not see her, but who had his father's instincts for reading a room. Are you the person who stopped the calls? Leo asked her, 10 minutes into the visit. Margaret went very still. Hyun Woo watched his mother face a question from a 7-year-old that she had been successfully avoiding for 8 years. Leo, Amara said carefully. It's all right, Leo said to his mother. Then to Margaret, Dad told me what happened. I'm not angry. I just want to know if you're sorry. The room was completely silent. Margaret Kang, 63 years old, who had navigated the Korean business establishment for 4 decades, who had built her family's reputation with the precision of an architect, looked at this small mixed-race boy with his clouded eyes and his direct question, and something in her face changed. Yes, she said quietly. I am sorry, Leo, very much. Leo nodded. Okay, he said. Then we can start from here. Margaret looked at her grandson. Then she looked at Hyun Woo. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The second thing that happened in those 3 weeks was Juliet Park. Juliet was Hyun Woo's former fiancée, a woman he had been engaged to 2 years earlier in a match arranged with the careful social engineering of 2 powerful Korean-American families. The engagement had ended, mutually and without drama on the surface, when Hyun Woo had called it off 18 months ago. The surface version was that they had decided they weren't compatible. The real version was that Hyun Woo had discovered Juliet's involvement in a series of financial irregularities connected to a subsidiary of Kang Corporation, irregularities that had benefited a rival company owned by her uncle, a man named Victor Chen. He had ended the engagement quietly and moved the financial investigation internally, not wanting the public disruption of a scandal. He had been too quiet about it. Because Juliet, who had believed the investigation was closed, learned about Leo through a source inside Margaret Kang's household staff. And Juliet, who had always been more strategic than she appeared, understood immediately what Leo's existence meant for the inheritance and succession structures of Kang Corporation. She began making arrangements. Hyun Woo did not know this yet. He was focused on his son's surgery. Don't go anywhere, bestie. This story is about to go somewhere you are completely unprepared for. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, whether you're in New York, Atlanta, London, Toronto, Sydney, or anywhere in this world. Hit that like button. We are not done yet. The surgery took 6 hours. Hyun Woo sat in the waiting room for all 6 of them. Amara sat beside him for the first 4 and then got up and walked to the window and stood there, and he let her stand there because he understood that she needed to process this in her own way. His mother sat across the room. At some point, somewhere around the 3rd hour, Margaret Kang stood up, crossed the room, and sat down beside Amara at the window. Hyun Woo watched them. He could not hear what they said, but he saw his mother place her hand briefly on Amara's arm. And he saw Amara not pull away. At hour 6, the surgeon came out. The procedure had gone exactly as planned. Both lenses replaced. No complications. Leo would need weeks of adjustment as his brain learned to process visual information it had been without for years. But the prognosis was excellent. With time and therapy, his vision should be substantially normal. Amara pressed both hands to her mouth. Hyun Woo felt his eyes sting in a way he had not felt since he was a child. Leo woke up with his eyes bandaged. They would stay bandaged for 48 hours. The morning they removed the bandages, Hyun Woo was there. The doctor unwrapped the gauze slowly. Leo blinked. The morning light was too much at first, and he squeezed his eyes shut, and the doctor said, "Gently take your time," and Leo breathed and opened his eyes again slowly. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at the window. He looked at his mother, who was crying silently beside the bed. He looked at Hyun Woo. He was quiet for a long moment. "You look like me," Leo said. Hyun Woo laughed. It came out rough and full of something he hadn't known he was holding. "Yes," he said, "we look like each other." Leo studied his father's face with the specific intensity of someone using a sense for the first time. "I knew you'd look like that," Leo said. "Like what?" "Serious," Leo said, "but not mean serious, just serious because things matter to you." He tilted his head. "Mom looks like that too sometimes." Hyun Woo looked at Amara. She was looking at Leo, but she felt his gaze and looked back. They held that for a moment. Then Leo said, "Can we go home now? I want to see everything." Home turned out to be a question that took several weeks to answer properly. Hyun Woo did not push. He had promised stability, and he kept the promise. Leo and Amara remained in their Washington Heights apartment initially. Hyun Woo visited daily. He hired a full support team for Leo's vision therapy and recovery. He arranged for Leo to begin school at a program designed for children transitioning from visual impairment to full sight, a specialized place with teachers who understood exactly what Leo was navigating. Leo adapted with the speed that had always characterized him. He learned fast. He asked questions constantly. He had spent 7 years building detailed mental maps of the world through sound and touch and smell, and now that vision was added to those maps, the integration was remarkable. He also, within 3 weeks of getting his sight back, identified that Juliet Park was watching his mother. He told his father on a Thursday afternoon at Hyun Woo's office, where Leo had come after school and was sitting in the large chair across from the desk doing his homework while Hyun Woo worked. "There's a woman," Leo said, not looking up from his notebook. "She's been outside our building twice, once on Monday and once yesterday. She watches Mom when Mom leaves for work." Hyun Woo put down his pen. "What does she look like?" Leo described her. Hyun Woo called his security team before Leo had finished the second sentence. What the investigation revealed in the following week was worse than Hyun Woo had anticipated. Juliet had not simply been watching. She had been building a case, fabricated, carefully constructed to suggest that Amara Mensah had been involved in a historical fraud related to her nonprofit's funding. The case was designed to result in Amara's arrest, and more importantly, to create a legal situation that would complicate her custody position and potentially remove Leo from her care. The fraud documentation had been planted, wire transfers rerouted, nonprofit records altered through a contact Juliet had inside the organization. Juliet's objective was to remove Amara from the picture, establish herself as a stabilizing presence in Leo's life, and position herself for a reconciliation with Hyun Woo that would place her back in line for everything Leo's existence had complicated. She had been working on this for 6 weeks. She had been meticulous. She had underestimated 2 things. The first was Hyun Woo's security team, which had been monitoring potential threats to Leo since the day the paternity results came back. The second was Leo, a 7-year-old boy who had spent his entire life learning to notice things that other people missed because noticing was the only tool he had. Hyun Woo moved quickly. He had spent 2 years being too quiet about Juliet's first set of transgressions. He was not going to make the same mistake twice. His legal team spent 4 days constructing a counter case from the security footage, the financial trail that showed the fund rerouting, and testimony from 3 people inside the nonprofit who had noticed irregularities and had been afraid to say anything. On the 5th day, Hyun Woo presented everything to the DA's office in Manhattan. Juliet was arrested on a Tuesday morning. Fraud, witness tampering, stalking, conspiracy. Her uncle Victor Chen's company, which had been quietly benefiting from Kang Corporation's misdirected subsidiary contracts for 2 years, was simultaneously referred to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Juliet's attorney called Hyun Woo's attorney 3 hours after the arrest. Hyun Woo's attorney said there was nothing to discuss. Amara found out what had been happening from Hyun Woo that evening. He told her everything, what Juliet had done, what Leo had noticed, what the investigation had found, what had been done about it. She listened to all of it without speaking. When he finished, the kitchen of her Washington Heights apartment was very quiet. Leo noticed, she said finally. Leo noticed, Hyun Woo confirmed. Amara was quiet for another moment. He's been protecting me since he was old enough to understand what protection meant, she said. Her voice was not quite steady. He's 7 years old, and he's been protecting me since he was old enough to understand what protection meant. I know, Hyun Woo said. He shouldn't have to do that. No, Hyun Woo said. He shouldn't, and he won't, not anymore. Amara looked at him. What does that mean? Hyun Woo held her gaze. It means that whatever this becomes between us, he said carefully, I am not going to be someone who shows up when it's convenient and disappears when it's difficult. I missed 7 years. I'm not missing anything else. He paused. And it means that the woman who raised my son alone for 7 years deserves someone standing beside her, if she wants that. The kitchen was very quiet. Hyun Woo, Amara said. I know, he said. I know it's not simple. I know there's 8 years of distance and a lot of things that haven't been said. I'm not asking for anything tonight. I'm just asking for the chance to be present. Amara looked at him for a long moment. You already are present, she said quietly. You've been present every day for 6 weeks. I know. Leo trusts you. I know that too. She looked at the table. Ask me again in 3 months, she said, when this has had time to be real rather than just new. 3 months, he said. Done. The 3 months that followed were the most ordinary and extraordinary of Hyun Woo's life simultaneously. He moved through his days differently. The 47-floor building still existed. The billion-dollar deals still happened. The board meetings and the conference calls and the international negotiations continued exactly as they always had. But there was now, at the center of it, a boy who came to his office after school on Tuesdays and Thursdays and did his homework in the big chair and asked questions about whatever he was reading that Hyun Woo answered as completely as he could. And the questions were never simple and often required Hyun Woo to think before answering. There was a boy who had started seeing for the first time and who grabbed his father's arm on the street, sometimes to point at things. That building, that color, that person's coat, the way light moved on water in Central Park, as though cataloging a world he had been waiting his whole life to see. There was a boy who one morning at breakfast said to his mother, I want to be an engineer. I want to build things that help people who can't see. And then looked at his father. Can you tell me about building companies, how it works? And Hyun Woo had talked for 45 minutes while Leo ate his cereal and listened with absolute focus. Amara had watched from across the table with her coffee. She had not said anything, but she had smiled. It was the first full smile Hyun Woo had seen from her since the hospital room. It was, he thought, the most beautiful thing he had seen in approximately 8 years. 3 months to the day, on a Saturday morning in Central Park, Hyun Woo and Amara were sitting on a bench, while Leo ran ahead of them on the path with the specific joy of a child who had recently discovered running, was something he could do, weaving between other park users, turning back periodically to make sure they were still there. 3 months, Amara said. 3 months, Hyun Woo confirmed. She looked at Leo on the path ahead. He's thriving, she said. Because of you, Hyun Woo said. 8 years of you before any of this. She was quiet. What do you want to ask me? She said. Hyun Woo turned to look at her directly. I want to ask you to give this a real chance, he said. Not just co-parenting, not just logistics, us, whatever that looks like, however long it takes to build. He held her gaze. I know I can't recover 8 years. I'm not trying to. I'm asking about the years ahead. Amara looked at him. I spent 8 years not trusting people easily, she said. Leo taught me that trust is built in small things, in showing up, in following through. She paused. You've been showing up. I intend to keep showing up, he said. She looked at Leo, who had stopped on the path to crouch down and look at something on the ground, something small that had caught his newly working eyes. Yes, she said quietly. Hyun Woo looked at her. Yes, he said. Yes, she said again, more fully, with the specific completeness of a woman who has made a decision after appropriate time and appropriate evidence and is not going to qualify it to death. Leo looked back from the path. He could see them now, his father and his mother, sitting on a bench in Central Park in the morning light. He grinned. Are you guys finally figuring it out? He called. Amara laughed. Hyun Woo shook his head slowly. He's 7, Hyun Woo said. He's your son, Amara said. What did you expect? The Kang Corporation's next annual report, released 18 months later, listed for the first time a foundation bearing Leo's name focused on pediatric vision care for underserved communities in the United States and internationally. It had been Leo's idea, presented to the board in a 5-minute presentation that an 8-year-old had delivered with the focused precision of a future CEO, drawing from his own experience, and from the research he had done with his father's resources about how many children in the world were in the situation he had been in. The board had approved it unanimously. Margaret Kang had cried for the first time in a board meeting in 40 years. Victor Chen's company had been delisted from the exchange following the SEC investigation. Juliet Park had accepted a plea deal and was serving 3 years. Amara had been promoted to executive director of her nonprofit, which had grown significantly following a major partnership with the Kang Foundation's international division. A partnership that had been structured at arm's length with full independent oversight, because both Amara and Hyun Woo understood that the integrity of her work could not be compromised by their personal relationship. They had gotten married on a Saturday in June in a garden in Atlanta, Amara's hometown, with family from Ghana and Georgia and Korea and New York all present. Leo had been the ring bearer. He had walked down the aisle with his father's precision and his mother's dignity and the specific joy of a child who understood exactly what the day meant. During the ceremony, Leo had stood between his parents at the altar and held both their hands. He had not been asked to do this. He had simply positioned himself there because it was the right place to be. The officiant had smiled and adjusted the ceremony to include him. And Kang Hyun Woo, who had been told by 3 different doctors over the course of his 30s that biological fatherhood was medically unlikely, stood in a garden in Atlanta with his son's hand in his left hand and his wife's hand in his right hand, and felt, with complete certainty, that the boy who had grabbed his sleeve in the rain on a Tuesday afternoon had been the beginning of everything. And that is where this story ends. Not on a Manhattan sidewalk in the rain, not in a hospital waiting room, not in a courtroom where a woman who had bet against the wrong family discovered exactly what that bet cost, but in a garden in Atlanta with a family that had found each other through the most unlikely series of events and had decided, once found, to hold on. Leo Mensa was 7 years old when he counted subway stops alone and found his father's building by instinct. He did not know it was his father's building. He only knew it was the most expensive building on the block, and that expensive buildings meant people who might be able to help. He was right, but he got more than help. He got a father who had been waiting, without knowing he was waiting, for exactly this. and Amara Mensah, who had raised him alone for 7 years with nothing but her own hands and her own will, and an absolute refusal to let her son's circumstances define his future, got to watch her son see for the first time. Watch him run in Central Park. Watch him present to a corporate board at age 8. Watch him become exactly what she had always known he was. And Kang Hyun Woo, the billionaire CEO who had been told he would never be a father, learned that biology is not the only way a family begins. Sometimes it begins with a small hand on a wet sleeve, and a voice that says, "Please, sir, help me," and a man who, for reasons he cannot explain, stops. Now I want to speak to you directly before you go. If you watched this entire story, if you held your breath waiting for those bandages to come off, if your heart broke when Leo asked if he could call him dad, if you smiled in that Central Park garden, then this channel was made for you. Subscribe right now. Hit the like button. Share this video with someone who needs to believe that it is never too late for the right people to find each other. Drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from. I want every single viewer in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, in the United Kingdom, and everywhere else in this world to let me know they were here for Leo's story. And one final thing. If you watched this entire story and you don't subscribe, don't like, don't comment, and don't share, then that silence means you are on Juliet's side. It means you are comfortable with a woman who tried to destroy a mother's reputation and remove a child from his home because a little boy's existence was inconvenient for her plans. We know that is not who you are. So hit subscribe, hit like, leave a comment, share this story. Because Leo's story deserves to be heard. And Afro-Korean love stories will keep bringing you more. Thank you for watching.